It was an unusually warm afternoon in early spring when the sun gleamed through the trees, casting long shadows on the soft earth beneath. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. Most of the animals in the woods were busy with their usual routines: squirrels darting up trees, birds hopping between branches, and deer grazing peacefully at the edge of the clearing. But, amidst all the tranquility, a small, unusual problem was unfolding high up in the branches of a large oak tree. Far above the forest floor, a young raccoon had found himself in a rather unfortunate predicament. His name was Rocky, a curious and playful little raccoon who had recently left his mother's care to explore the world on his own. Rocky, like most raccoons, was always looking for adventure. His nimble paws were excellent for climbing, and he had a knack for finding food in the most unusual places. But there was one thing Rocky hadn't quite figured out yet: how to safely get down from a tree once he had climbed too high. It all started innocently enough. Rocky had been following the scent of a particularly delicious-smelling nut and had scampered up the oak tree without a second thought. The higher he climbed, the more excited he became, until he reached the very top, where the branches were thick and intertwined, and the view of the forest stretched out before him like a vast sea of green. It was beautiful up there. But as he looked around, Rocky realized something: he had no idea how to get back down. At first, he thought he could just climb down the same way he had come up, but the branches below him were too thin and fragile to support his weight. He tried to move lower, testing each new branch with his tiny paws, but every time he reached for a new one, it would wobble or crack. Panic started to set in. Rocky's heart pounded in his chest as he looked down at the ground far below, realizing just how high up he was. His breathing quickened. He had always been good at getting to high places, but coming down was another story altogether. The forest below him seemed to grow smaller and smaller, the leaves far beneath him turning into a blur of green. Rocky's normally calm demeanor was replaced by a growing sense of dread. He tried calling for help, but his tiny voice barely echoed through the vast expanse of the tree. As the afternoon wore on, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a soft golden glow over the forest. Rocky's situation became more dire with each passing moment. He had no idea how to get down, and with the sun setting, he realized that the longer he stayed up there, the colder and darker it would get. Up until this point, Rocky had always been able to rely on his instincts. But this time, his instincts failed him. The sense of panic grew, and he realized he was trapped, stuck at the top of the oak tree with no way to get back down. But what Rocky didn't know was that help was already on the way. Down below, a group of wildlife experts had been called to the scene after someone in the nearby neighborhood spotted the little raccoon stuck in the tree. They had been working tirelessly to rescue animals in need for years, and this was just another day on the job. Little did Rocky know, his story was about to take a turn. And soon, he would have a chance to reclaim his freedom, not only from the tree but from the fear that had kept him frozen in place for so long. As the golden rays of the setting sun bathed the forest in a warm glow, the wildlife rescue team gathered in the clearing beneath the oak tree. A sense of urgency filled the air as they set up their equipment, preparing for the task at hand. The team had rescued animals from all kinds of situations over the years, but each mission was different. Each one presented its own unique challenges, and this one was no exception. The leader of the team, Elena, was a seasoned wildlife expert who had spent years working with animals in need. She was calm, methodical, and knew how to keep her cool under pressure. She stood with her arms crossed, studying the tree where Rocky was stuck. The raccoon's tiny form was visible far above, huddled on a thick branch, his fur matted with a mix of dirt and leaves. It was clear he had been up there for some time. Elena turned to her team. "We need to make sure we approach this carefully. A frightened raccoon can be unpredictable, and we don't want to scare him further." One of the team members, a young man named Carlos, nodded. He had worked with Elena for years and trusted her instincts. He checked the harnesses and ropes they would use to climb the tree. "I'll go up first. We can't risk spooking him with loud noises." "I'll take it slow." Elena agreed. "Good. Once you get close enough, assess his condition. If he's too scared to come down on his own, we'll have to use the tranquilizer. But let's try to avoid that if we can." Carlos nodded and began to climb the tree with the agility of a squirrel. The tree creaked and groaned as his weight shifted, but he was careful not to make any sudden movements that might alarm the little raccoon. The other team members stood below, watching anxiously, ready to assist when needed. Rocky, perched high above in his treetop prison, noticed the movement below. At first, he thought it was just another animal moving through the woods, but the steady approach of the humans soon became clear. The raccoon froze, his small body rigid as he watched Carlos ascend the tree with slow, deliberate steps. His heart raced in his chest. The humans had seen him. What would they do to him? Would they help? Or would they be another threat? Carlos reached a thick branch several feet below Rocky. The raccoon was now close enough to be within his reach, but the situation was tense. If Carlos made the wrong move, the raccoon could panic and scurry deeper into the branches, or worse, fall. The team below held their breath as Carlos spoke softly to the raccoon, his voice a calm murmur meant to reassure. "Hey there, little guy," Carlos whispered. "We're here to help you. You don't need to be scared." Rocky's tiny body quivered as he listened to the soft, unfamiliar voice. He didn't know what to make of the humans, but for the first time in hours, a small flicker of hope ignited in his chest. These beings, these strange creatures, weren't here to harm him. They were here to help. Carlos slowly extended his hand toward Rocky, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. He knew he had to gain the raccoon's trust quickly. One wrong movement and the animal might bolt. But the young raccoon was too exhausted, too fearful to move. He just sat there, his bright eyes wide with uncertainty, but he didn't run away. Carlos continued speaking softly, his voice calm and reassuring. "I know you're scared. But we're not going to hurt you. I'm just going to help you get down safely." With careful precision, Carlos began to inch closer to Rocky, making sure his body language was non-threatening. Slowly, the raccoon began to relax. Perhaps, just perhaps, these humans were different. They were trying to help. The team watched from below, their eyes locked on the delicate scene unfolding above them. They knew this was a pivotal moment. If Carlos could just get close enough to gently coax the little raccoon onto a harness or into a carrier, the rescue would be a success. But it wasn't over yet. Carlos was now only a few feet from Rocky. He reached out again, this time touching the raccoon's furry back with the gentlest of motions. To his relief, Rocky didn't flinch or try to scramble away. Instead, the raccoon seemed to melt a little under the calm touch. The team below let out a collective sigh of relief. Elena, still focused on the mission, smiled. "Looks like we're almost there." But just as they thought the worst was over, Rocky made a small, panicked movement. He tried to shift his position, perhaps searching for a more secure place to cling to. But as he did, a branch beneath him snapped. It was as if time had slowed. The sharp crack of the breaking wood echoed through the trees. Without warning, Rocky tumbled. A gasp rose from the team below. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. Carlos lunged forward, instinctively reaching out to catch the falling raccoon. The world seemed to stretch out before Carlos in slow motion as he reached toward the falling raccoon. His heart skipped a beat as he saw Rocky plummeting through the air, his small body twisting and flailing in a desperate attempt to regain balance. The ground below seemed impossibly far away in that brief moment. Every muscle in Carlos' body tensed, his focus narrowing on the raccoon, knowing that one misstep could mean disaster. With a swift, practiced motion, Carlos extended both arms, trying to get under the tiny creature before it hit the ground. Time snapped back into place as his hands closed around the raccoon's soft body, cushioning its fall with all the care he could muster. The impact was softer than it could have been, but the jolt still rattled Carlos as he quickly pulled the raccoon close to his chest to protect it. The team below erupted into relieved gasps. Elena was the first to run forward, helping Carlos to steady himself. She saw the raccoon, cradled safely in Carlos' arms, still wide-eyed but unharmed. "Got him," Carlos exclaimed, a mix of adrenaline and relief flooding his voice. He gently cradled Rocky, who was now frozen in place, staring up at him in shock, his fur ruffled and his tiny heart racing. Elena knelt beside Carlos, carefully inspecting the raccoon. "Is he okay?" Carlos nodded, his voice calm but tinged with concern. "He's shaken up, but he doesn't seem to have any injuries." He's just scared. Elena gently stroked Rocky's fur to calm him, whispering softly, "You're safe now, little one. We're here to help." For a few moments, the forest was still, the only sound being the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. The raccoon slowly relaxed in Carlos' arms, his body beginning to soften as he recognized that the danger had passed. His wide, fearful eyes started to lose their wild edge, and he stopped trembling. It was as if, in that moment, he understood that the humans were not a threat, but a lifeline. With the raccoon safely in his grasp, Carlos made his way back down the tree, moving carefully but swiftly. The rescue team formed a quiet line beneath him, ready to support him as he descended. The relief was palpable, but they all knew the real work was yet to come. Once Carlos reached the ground, Elena carefully took Rocky from his arms and placed him into a padded carrier. The raccoon, still dazed from the fall and the ordeal, huddled in the corner of the carrier, his eyes darting around warily, but his breathing slowed. He wasn't out of the woods yet, not literally or figuratively, but he was safe. "We'll take him back to the center," Elena said softly, looking at the team. "Let's get him settled and make sure he's okay." The team quickly packed up their gear, taking one last look at the oak tree, where the branches swayed gently in the evening breeze, a silent witness to the rescue. It had been a close call, but Rocky had made it. As they loaded the carrier into the truck, Carlos glanced back toward the tree one last time, his heart still racing from the rush of the rescue. He had always known that working with wildlife was unpredictable, but moments like these, moments when lives were saved, made it all worth it. A few days later, at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, Rocky had started to recover from his ordeal. The staff carefully monitored his condition, making sure he was eating well, and allowing him time to rest and heal from the stress of his high-altitude adventure. He had been given the best care possible, and it showed. His once disheveled fur was now sleek and shiny, and his tiny paws had regained their strength. The fear in his eyes had gradually faded, replaced by curiosity and the quiet confidence of an animal who had been given a second chance. Elena and Carlos, along with the rest of the team, visited Rocky each day, making sure he was adjusting well to life back in the center. They spoke to him softly, allowing him to become familiar with them while also ensuring that he retained his natural instincts. They knew that, eventually, he would need to be released back into the wild, where he truly belonged. The time for Rocky's release came sooner than anyone expected. One crisp morning, as the sunlight filtered through the trees, Elena and Carlos stood at the edge of a dense forest clearing. They had chosen this spot carefully, far enough from the main roads and human settlements to give Rocky the best chance at a peaceful return to his natural life. Rocky was awake in his carrier, his keen eyes scanning the surrounding woods. He seemed ready. Though the rescue had been a terrifying experience for him, the time he had spent recovering in the center had allowed him to regain his strength and trust in the world around him. He was, once again, the curious, brave little raccoon who had ventured too high up a tree, and now, he was ready to explore the world on his own terms. Elena opened the door of the carrier slowly, giving Rocky a moment to adjust. "You're free now, little one," she whispered softly, giving him one last gentle touch. With a cautious, but determined step, Rocky crept out of the carrier and onto the soft forest floor. He paused for just a moment, looking up at the trees above, as if deciding which path to take. Then, with a soft rustle of leaves, he scampered off into the woods, his tiny feet carrying him into the safety and freedom of the forest once again. Carlos watched as Rocky disappeared into the trees, a smile spreading across his face. "He's got it. He's going to be okay." Elena nodded. "He's home." And with that, the little raccoon who had once been trapped so high in the branches of an oak tree was now free. He had been given the chance to live his life on his own terms, with all the adventure and freedom the wild could offer. The rescue had been a success, not just in getting him out of that tree, but in giving him back the life he deserved. As the team walked back to their truck, Elena turned to Carlos, her voice warm with satisfaction. "Another day, another rescue. It's why we do this." Carlos grinned, his heart still full from the day's events. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And with that, they drove off, knowing that somewhere in the vast forest, Rocky the raccoon was once again living freely, high in the trees, where he belonged.